Hello and welcome to a fresh episode of NBRI New Business and Retail Insights from the Center for Retail Studies, Mays Business School, Texas A&M University. I'm your host, Venki Shankar, Director of Research and Coleman Chair, Professor of Marketing. It is my pleasure to welcome our guest today, Dr. Leandro Guissoni, who's a full-time professor of marketing at FGV EAESP, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Leandro has been a visiting scholar at the Darden School of Business, University of Virginia, and at the Harvard Business School. Leandro has coordinated marketing research at Coca-Cola, Brazil, and developed more than 20 marketing, sales, and strategy consulting projects for more than 15 companies. Leandro's research has been supported by companies such as Nielsen, Natura, Johnson & Johnson, Louisa Magazine. He's the author or co-author of Shopper Marketing and Metrics for Marketing Communication. He's also an expert on marketing issues in Brazil, and his research includes marketing metrics, e-commerce, channels, trade, and shopper marketing. Welcome, Leandro, to NBRI. How are you doing today?
Hello, Venki. Glad to be here. I'm doing well, thank you. What about yourself?
I'm doing great, thank you. Despite the challenging times, I noticed that Brazil is going through a very rough time with respect to COVID-19. I hope things are looking okay now.
Yes. Actually, we are bracing for the second wave, but It's a summertime in Brazil, and so far we are dealing well, as expected, at least with the situation.
Okay, that's good to know. I introduced you using your achievements, but how would you like to introduce yourself, Leandro, in your own way? So that what are some of the mentioned 5 words that best describes you, right? What makes you tick, what keeps you awake, and what is your mission, etc.
Sure, Venki. Well, actually, I like to build strong relationship. Maybe this is one of my strengths. I like to connect good people and form, new networks, bringing together different scholars, executives, connecting people in general. To me, it's like building a band. I used to play the piano, so you need to put good people like guitar players, vocalists, someone to play the bass and drums and the keyboard. So I like to connect people and build strong relationships. I would also describe myself as I'm very driven by purpose. Venki, this could be good, but sometimes it punishes you. For example, I would rather go and work with people that I admire and that I see common values than to spend time, playing political games or doing things that I just cannot understand the reason why. This is another aspect.
Great. So I love your description and analogy to music. So you're a relationship builder and more importantly, an orchestrator of relationships, right? If you were to combine the music analogy, right? That's good to know. Tell me something about your research. I know you worked in companies before you started your academic journey. How would you summarize your research journey in the next couple of minutes? What were some of the key turning points in your research journey?
Sure, Venki. I do research on marketing mix effectiveness, multi-channel marketing, and customer-centric digital disruption. I've always prioritized establishing myself as a person who bridges the gap between theory and practice. As you mentioned, I started working in the industry and then I moved into the academia. And in this sense, my research journey is really connected with my mentors, Paul Ferris and Raj Venkatesan from the Darden School, Thales Teixeira, a former Harvard Business School associate professor of marketing, and Marcos Fava Neves, who was my PhD supervisor, and he's a faculty at the University of Sao Paulo and Purdue University. But let me just take a step back, if you allow me, because as you mentioned, my research journey is connected with the early stage of my career. I have a finance background. I haven't mentioned that to you, and I started work really young. I would say that while most of my friends were having fun, I started working at Coca-Cola in Brazil when I was 20 years old. And
Wow.
well, I've worked there for 5 years in marketing, and I was always the one trying to measure things, such as the return on marketing investments, the economic value added that would come from the marketing investments. And to do so, I started to read some academic papers, including yours, by the way, at that time.
Thank you.
And I just loved the possibility of solving real world problems using a scientific approach, which led me to my Master of Science and PhD. So basically, I left Coca-Cola in 2008, and I went for the Master of Science and PhD. But the turning point, as you asked, was really an email that I sent to the Darden School professor Paul Ferris, one of the biggest reference in the field of marketing metrics. In 2010, I emailed him, and this is really a fun story. And later, I emailed Darden professor Raj Vekatensan to ask for a chance to work with them and learn from them, because basically I was trying to solve problems that, to be honest with you, I didn't see anyone in Brazil who could help me in solving the types of problems that I was asking, my research questions. And so I was offered a deal where a visiting PhD at Darden could be arranged if a company in Brazil collaborated with our research. I love to work with secondary data, and so Paul and Raj. And since I worked at Coca-Cola, I connected the dots, and they collaborated with us during our first research. And I was basically interested in understanding how consumer packaged good companies such as Coca-Cola and other, CPGs could achieve positive results by managing their brands through different retail formats. Because, in Brazil, we have around 25% of the retail sales goes through mom and pop stores. And I was interested in understanding marketing mix effectiveness from a CPG perspective with big box retailers and mom and pop stores in emerging markets. So this was my first research project, and I was fortunate enough to publish this work in the Journal of Retailing. And we found that the marketing mix elements varies with the channel format. And for example, advertising was not effective when you were marketing your brand through mom and pop stores, for example.
Okay.
So this type of finding was really strong to me at that time.
Right. So it looks like from there you've moved on to other topics, as you mentioned, disruption, digital disruption, and so on. So you mentioned about Brazil. So let's talk a little bit more about Brazil, the ecosystem in Brazil, right? Brazil is one of the largest countries, both in population and economy size, and is also one of the 4 countries in the BRIC emerging market paradigm. And Brazil is going through some growing pains right now. So what are some of the new things that are happening in Brazil's economy?
Well, as the economy, I would say that since 2010, 2011, we've been seeing rapid changes in the economy. For example, GDP, because of some political change, and also because Brazilians, and this is not me saying, but Brazilians are kind of bipolars. They are either really happy and optimistic, or they are really pessimist. So if you take a look at the consumer confidence index, for example, during this pandemic, for example, wow, it went down dramatically in March and April, and then it went up like to the highest levels ever around September, in the middle of the pandemic. So these rapid changes in consumer confidence is for me a thing that stood out that can be related with further research, I believe.
That's interesting. And tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing of late with decoupling, for example, and the digital disruption. And it's a very timely because the pandemic has accelerated a lot of shift towards digital. There's a lot of digital transformation. So tell us something about your work in that space.
Yeah, sure. Some of the latest research I've been doing is on digital disruption. Because after starting to work with the Nielsen data, Coca-Cola data, which it was more, related to physical stores. In 2016, I wanted to learn about e-commerce strategies, and I was fortunate enough to work with Thales Teixeira at Harvard as a business scholar there, and he coined a term called decoupling. So basically, it is a customer-centric digital disruption approach. It's not like the conventional approach, more related to technology. Technologies are part of digital transformation, but according to his perspective, for example, and from his past work at Harvard, it is predominantly a phenomenon that would come from a customer. It's a customer-driven phenomenon. And he coined this term decoupling, which is a different way to look at customer activities and the competition between startup companies and traditional incumbent companies. So decoupling is the breaking of the links between customer activities by a digital player that have been traditionally provided together, for example, for Best Buy or Sephora or other retailers. And I'm trying to, sorry, Venki, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I said, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand how does decoupling, for example, take place in Brazil in comparison with the US, because digital inclusion has started to accelerate right now. And for example, we have many new startup businesses in Brazil, as well as Amazon, for example. Before 2014, Amazon in Brazil was just a rainforest,
Now, That's a good one. Yeah, the real Amazon and the behemoth Amazon in retailing and business. Yeah, go ahead.
It's true. And what is interesting is that, for example, I've worked with Magazine Luiza, one of our largest electronic retailers in Brazil, and they were trying to anticipate the Amazon entry in Brazil, for example. So for you to have an idea, I co-author a Harvard case study with Magazine Luiza, and we started working with Magazine Luiza around in the year of 2015, 2016. And Magazine Luiza's stock price increased by 30,000% since then. But I was too focused on writing the case study, and I don't have any of their stocks. But it's interesting how they were responding to digital disruption and how they were preparing themselves since the early 2000s, learning from the mistakes that Best Buy, Circuit City, in the past, and other retailers in the US were, and the tough early competition with Amazon since the .com bubble. So Magazine Luiza, for example, they started to develop their own technology. And instead of following the footsteps of Walmart, that Walmart at that time, they were separating the online and the offline businesses.
Right.
Magazine Luiza, they went the
integrated.
Other way. Yeah, they integrated. So they were able to optimize costs. They were able to, but one interesting aspect was that they were offering different prices according to different channels. So it's like you were going to Magazine Luiza store, physical store, and it was more expensive. The prices were more expensive than in their
online
channel.
Yeah, I remember visiting with you. I think one of the Magazine Luiza stores. I believe it's in Sao Paulo, right?
Yeah, in Sao Paulo, when you deliver a keynote, a really good one on artificial intelligence. 3 years ago, let's say, Venki.
Yes, you good memory, yeah. And that is interesting. How did they manage that price differential between online and offline? Didn't consumers really have a backlash over that? Because typically they expect price integrity, right?
Yeah, yeah, but there is a catch because at that time they had only 15% of overlapping of multi-channel customers, if you will.
Okay.
So basically, they were offering different channels to different consumer
Customer.
profiles. So
Okay. So
they were able to grow profitably because of that.
okay.
You know.
But now are the prices closer or integrated across the channels in Magazine Luiza?
Yeah, this is a good question, Venki. Yes, and they had planned to do all of that because they were basically rebuilding margins. They were taking the opportunity of having different customers to different that would go to different channels, and they were rebuilding margins by launching, for example, their marketplace, their platform business in 2016 or 17, if I'm not wrong. So basically, now they make much more. They make more money selling their products through
As
the
a
market.
marketplace. Yeah.
They don't have
This
it's a negative working capital business, and they were able to rebuild margins in a way that now that the overlapping has increased and multi-channel customers now the same customers are going to
all the
different
channels.
channels, all the channels. Now they are ready to decrease their in-store price, for example.
That's good to know because it's very similar to Amazon. Amazon's 58% of Amazon business today is from its marketplace platform, or third-party sellers. And so, how are they competing with Amazon right now in Brazil? Magazine Luiza.
Yeah, it's a very tough competition because Amazon has announced new distribution centers, for example, in Brazil, and also, they have Amazon Prime, and this is
Right.
this is really important in attracting loyal customers, for example, and offering lower shipping
Lower.
fees. But Magazine Luiza, on the other hand, they were acquiring, for example, in the beginning of this year, they acquired 9 companies within 9 weeks.
Wow.
So yeah, logistic companies, advertising companies, and
Some technology companies too, right?
yeah, they developed their own technology actually, Magazine Luiza, and they acquired Netshoes, for example. They launched a new vertical with a more frequent products like shoes and sporting goods that consumers shop more frequently. So basically, they were trying to sell more frequent categories. Right
Right.
now, they are trying to curate all the customer experience and to control all of that. They're delivering a really good experience. They have more than 1,000 stores in Brazil. Amazon doesn't have any store in
A
Brazil
physical
yet,
store, yeah.
physical
Yeah.
stores. Yeah, so they have
Right.
1,000 physical stores that they the same as Target did in the
Okay.
past. They turned their stores into shoppable distribution centers. So basically, they have more than 1,000 distribution centers. If you
Interesting.
look
That's
at that,
awesome. Yeah. And I'm
yeah.
sure they must be that those stores must be going through a rough time with COVID, but because they are digitally transformed, they are in a better position than many other retailers, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. This is fair to
Okay.
say. This is fair to say because they had accelerated the digital transformation before the pandemic. So
Correct.
on the other hand, retailers that were in the middle of this digital transformation,
They
uh,
got stuck. Yeah.
they are suffering. They are suffering big
Yeah.
time.
So that brings us to this idea that digital disruption. You talk about decoupling. How is the ecosystem in Brazil with respect to that? I know that Brazil used to have a very vibrant startup culture. And what I know is that about 3/4 of all the VC funding in Latin America goes to Brazil. So that speaks volumes for the strength of the venture capital investments over there. So how's the ecosystem right now?
Yeah, it's under development, I would say, Venki. We have some unicorns, for example, in the financial service market. For example, Nubank is one of
Nubank,
them.
I've heard of it, yeah. Then
Nubank.
there's 99 Taxi, and then there is isn't that Movil, or it's a mobile startup company, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Are
have
all
99 Taxi and Easy Taxi competing against Uber.
right.
Uh,
So how are they all doing? They must be probably, and then iFood is also there. I heard about iFood. Um, right. Are they all probably giving lots of hopes for lots of entrepreneurs to start up newer and newer ventures, going back to discovering breaks in customer value chain and decoupling some of those things? Is that how these startups are doing in Brazil, or how are they really discovering these ideas?
Yeah, actually, they are discovering this idea by learning from what happened in the US. And
Right.
some of the startup businesses are actually copycats. So if you take a look
Copycats.
at, for example, in the US, you have Birchbox
Right.
that decouple the activities, for example, by offering when consumers didn't have to go to Sephora stores to try out and test out new products because it's a subscription-based model that they would
Mhm.
send the product for you, sample size products.
Right.
So they decouple the activities between choosing and purchasing. And we have in Brazil Glambox, for example, which is a copycat. It's
Mhm.
the same as Birchbox. We have also some other companies that they are keeping their radar on, trying to see, for example, even PillPack in the US. I found out by talking to some VCs 2 weeks ago that there is a copycat just getting started in Brazil. So basically, one way to go is to copy some ideas, because some companies, startups in the US that have been growing, they didn't have time to expand geographically
Right. Right.
speaking. So this is one way to go. Another way to go is by looking at deeply into consumer pain points, specific pain points in Brazil, like
Right.
Nubank that you mentioned. Because
Right.
try to open an account in Brazil, Venki. It's so hard. It's so hard. You cannot believe in the bureaucracy, and it's really complicated. So Nubank, by decoupling these activities, you don't have to go to the bank to have a credit card or to have your account. They were able to grow really fast. The problem is they, like many startup business, they have been growing, but they are not profitable. So
Right.
we don't know whether they would be able to become profitable one day, because here in Brazil, what people says is, don't worry, because Amazon, they were not profitable for 8 years. So
Right.
we're just following their, their
Footsteps. Right. Yeah, that is good.
footsteps.
But Amazon had a lot of backing, investor backing and VC backing, but I don't know whether Nubank will have that extended lease of life. But let's come back to some of your work, cases on monetization, right? That brings us to the idea of monetization, right? And you have a case study on monetizing insurance at Trove. Tell us something about that. What is Trove, and how is the insurance space, and what are the challenges of monetization there?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I have a case study on Trove, which is a startup in the Silicon Valley, and they are trying to disrupt the insurance industry. Basically, they offer micro duration insurance, and also that you can purchase for any item, for example, for your camera, for your with the click of the finger. So basically, they have this beautiful platform that you don't need to go through all the traditional to go through all the traditional consumer activities in order to have your insurance, or to make a claim, or even to cancel your insurance. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have this, I'm traveling to Rio de Janeiro, it's not safe there, I have my camera, so let's just hire this insurance for a week, for example. It's so convenient to consumers. They basically started their businesses actually as a platform connected with retailers in order to organize people's belong, for example,
Right.
electronics products.
Huh.
And then Scott Wojcik, who is Trove CEO, he was in the middle of a trip, business trip, and Australian reinsurance company approached, called Sunset, approached Scott and told him, hey, this is a good opportunity to offer insurance because you already have this data, this consumer data. So so basically they test out this idea in the Australian market. It went, it worked really well. And then they moved to other markets such as the UK, Japan, and then they got the licenses to operate in the US with a reinsurer called Munich Re. So yeah, so basically they are a platform. They don't take the risk because, so the monetization, the difficult part is because imagine it, it's so expensive to acquire a new customer. For example, in the US for insurance, they were spending a lot on customer acquisition, and digital marketing, but the CLV, the customer lifetime value, was really low because consumers were hiring the insurance for a week, for a month, for not for the whole year, for example. And you know what happened? High customer acquisition costs, low CLV. It's difficult. So
how are they managing that? How are they managing that?
They were trying to think of new vertical, for example, and new under this concept of open innovation, trying to help and to collaborate with other companies such as car rental companies, to make all the insurance policy very easily to reduce time and effort from consumers to rent a car, or even autonomous vehicles. For example, they were trying to have to offer insurance for car passengers, for example, and to cope with retailers offering that would offer extended warranty, for example. So they were trying to build partnership in order to create new revenues streams out of these partnerships.
Okay, sounds very interesting. You also have some work with building a new online marketplace, the OLX story in Brazil. So tell us something about that. What is the OLX, and what are some of the insights from that study?
Yeah, this is a good one, Venki. OLX, which stands for Online Marketplace.
Exchange.
They were exchange marketplace. They were actually founded by a former Harvard student from Argentina. And the idea was basically to become the Craigslist of the rest of the world. So basically, the idea was to offer. Sorry.
Classified business. It's a classified business. Yeah.
It's a classified business. And they were able to grow in markets such as Brazil and India. And in 2016, Brazil became the largest market for OLX. And OLX was really strong, for example, when selling used cars, for example, and in real estate business. These are the two main verticals they have. And they were able to, to change a little bit the culture in Brazil and encourage people to sell their items, their used goods, for example, and items. They invested heavily on advertising, TV advertising, for example, not only in digital marketing, trying to encourage people to do that. And they were able to engage both consumers and also private and professional sellers. So basically, they were able to have really high traffic in their website, and they were trying to grow. And we approach in this Harvard case study, how can digital businesses grow? For example, they could grow by launching new verticals. They could grow by going and
adjacent spaces.
Yeah, for example, payments. They didn't offer payments. You have to have an in-person meeting with the seller in order to pay and to get the product. So basically, moving into these adjacencies. And the other way to go would be to focus on the core. For example, car sales and also real estate, because the penetration rate was really low in Brazil.
And you can push it further, yeah.
Push it further.
Right.
Yeah. So we discussed this trade-off, the pros and cons for each of the decisions. And as because it was really dangerous for OLX at that time, and this time of decision was really important because they didn't want to pursue, for example, a strategy such as eBay, because eBay's had a really difficult time because they were competing at the same time with Amazon, but they are also so they were in the middle, and OLX didn't want to stay in the middle. So basically, they started establishing partnerships to move into new adjacencies. It didn't work out so well because this is a classified business. People want to meet the other person. So basically now they are pushing back a little bit their businesses, and they made a huge acquisition in Brazil, and they are focused on the core right now, the core business, real estate and car business.
So that raises a very interesting issue between coupling and decoupling, right? One of the things we learned from these decoupling ideas is that look for opportunities in the value chains to see how we can decouple activities, and then do it very well, and they steal shares from the incumbent players. But we've seen how companies grow, like Amazon, Alibaba, and all. They actually get into lots of white spaces, right? Adjacent spaces, other activities, and so on. And that's one way to grow. So what is the balance for firms, start these ideas, and then they start tasting some success? How do they grow? I mean, if they continue to do what they're good in, they may not be able to grow. So should they couple after decoupling?
Yeah, this is a good question. And yes, I would, for example, a startup business, they often start, for example, with being really specialized into one or two customer activities, because they cannot compete with large established players by offering all of these activities that, for example, Sephora, Best Buy, or any other retailers offer.
Right.
But after that, once they have proven their business model, and they learn how to acquire customers, to engage customers, and also to make money, they
keep
have
them loyal, keep them loyal and increase the lifetime value, right?
Yeah. Once they are able to do that, what is next? And of course, you can launch new verticals. For example, it's like a building. You are going to build another floor and another one. But what Thales and I, what we have been seeing is that one way to go is to move into other customer adjacencies and to recouple the activities that were once decoupled.
Okay, good.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it looks like as soon as you do this, somebody else will come and decouple some of them and do it better than you, and this cycle goes on, right? Probably, right? Because it means that you have to be 24/7 customer focused or centric. Otherwise, the danger of you getting decoupled is high, right?
Yes. It's true, because otherwise you are going to, acquire new startups, for example, that started to compete with you. And just by acquiring new startups, this is not going to work well.
Right.
And what we learned from Alibaba, as you mentioned, and other digital players like Amazon, what we learned is that if, and this is a little bit different in strategy, because sometimes the new customer adjacency is different from the core business. So it's completely different. For example, Alibaba, they have so many different businesses like Alipay, the B2B, B2C, and C2C marketplace. They have logistics company. They have even they manufacture devices. So it's really difficult to explain that if you go back to the books in the early 80s, for example, that were explaining how companies were growing by launching new businesses.
Diversified businesses. They used to call it diversification. But here there's a common thread, which is the consumer, the customer is the same. So they are getting into spaces of the same customer, the activities that they do and the needs that they have outside the core product or core business, right? And so there is some thread in here, except that it's hard to pull it off because you have to have domain knowledge in newer and newer things, right?
Yeah, it's really difficult, and but one of the things is that new digital businesses, for example, that are growing, they have they have less problems in terms of culture and adapting themselves into this new environment.
Right.
So probably is one thing, and they have been receiving large investments. So probably this is one aspect. They still have a closer relationship with customers that traditional players, they were actually losing touch with
Right,
customers.
exactly.
So
That brings us back to your old description of yourself as a relationship builder, because that's ultimately customer relationship is very important, right? So that's good to know. Now, we've come a long way discussing a lot of things. Where do you see what are the biggest opportunities for Brazil going forward in the maybe 5 to 10 years?
Well, for Brazil in this new digital ecosystem and environment, I would say that it is to understand, for example, from a marketing function perspective, it is to understand that marketing has become more important than ever, but more decentralized, I would say, within organizations. So if you take a look at how companies right now in Brazil, they consider themselves as omni-channel, for example, companies.
Right.
But as a scholar, when I look at them, to me, they are not omni-channel. They are moving from multi-channel businesses into omni-channel businesses. So how can companies like Natura, for example, a company, you met the
Right.
one of the responsible for the digital
Founders,
transformation,
yeah.
yeah, Murilo in Brazil.
Yeah.
Natura, it's a large cosmetic company. They own the Body Shop. They
Right.
own Avon, not in North America, but in the rest of the
Right in
world.
Brazil.
And they were like just a direct selling company, a single channel company. And now they have physical stores, they have e-commerce, they have they have mobile sales, they have many other touch points with consumers, and it's really challenging to manage all of these touch points. But in Brazil specifically, as you asked, specifically in Brazil, I would say that companies, they have been enjoying this opportunity of having different customers using different channels. But after the COVID-19, what will happen is that we are going to have more multi-channel customers. And I don't know whether they are really well prepared for that, because they were in the middle, all companies trying to become omni-channel companies, they were in the middle of this transition. And I see them as being too focused on technology. And as I mentioned, for example, the CIOs and all the technology guys are actually leading all of have been trying to take all of this omni-channel approach forward, and sometimes they forget
That is,
that marketing is
it's
important and they need to be
right.
customer centric. So I would say
Right.
that this is an
The
opportunity in
mixture.
Brazil.
Right. That's a great prediction that the good opportunities come customers being customer centric in Brazil in the next 5 to 10 years. So we're almost coming to the end of the show. So in the last few minutes, we have a very good our target audience comprised of students, former students, entrepreneurs, uh, executives, uh, other stakeholders. what would be your message to them for the future? If there are any things that you can see from your crystal ball and say, hey, you need to be focusing on these things going forward to the future.
Okay, starting with scholars, I would say that an important message that I've been, learning and trying to apply to my professional life is to develop research that focus on relevant business problems. And I'm trying to build thought leadership content, not only with research papers, because to me, research is a mean to an end. It's not the end.
Right.
And we need to be relevant for executives, especially in retailing, because it changes so fast. It's so dynamic. And retail companies, they need, due to all of these transformation, digital transformation, technology, customer changes, it's been changing. They need they can learn from us, and we can help them to solve their problems. So I would say that the collaboration with retail companies and with consumer good companies and technology companies would be critical, and both sides could benefit from a good collaboration. And again, a good message is that research for me is to me is a mean to an end, and we need to cause social impact, as we often say at FGV in Brazil, for example.
Excellent. That's a great message, that we have to do relevant research that would be impactful in the society. And also that comes about by building collaborations among the different players in the system. Thank you so much, Leandro, for your insights and for the valuable time today. I enjoyed talking to you and I benefited from that. I'm sure our viewers and listeners will also do that. Good luck for you going forward in your research and the cases that you are planning to write for the future. I'm really looking forward to reading them in the future. Thank you so much for today.